The desert at night doesn't sound the way you'd expect. It isn't empty, far from it. The silence is alive, filled with soft humming winds that curl between the rocks, carrying whispers that aren't your own. The stars above feel sharp and endless, scattered across the black sky like eyes staring back. My campfire flickered low, the flames bending strangely, as though bowing to something just beyond the edge of the light. The sand shifted. I remember the sound, like footsteps dragging slowly, circling, though I could see no one. My lantern buzzed with static, the kind that makes your chest tighten, and the hairs on my arms prickled as if brushed by unseen fingers. The desert air smelled of iron, heavy and dry, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was crouched out there, hidden in the shadows of the jagged cliffs. A low, guttural breath rolled across the sand, deeper than any animal I had ever heard. That was when I realized I wasn't alone at the fire. The night wasn't just watching me. It was waiting. That's when I saw it. The desert was quiet. Cold air settled over the sand like a blanket, heavier than I expected at night. I had pitched my small tent on a flat ridge, far from any road, under a pale crescent moon. I struck a match and lit the fire, but something felt wrong. The flames didn't rise. They bent inward, collapsing toward themselves as if the wind weren't outside, but pressing from somewhere below. I leaned closer, expecting the usual warmth, but it barely reached my hands. A thin, flickering glow, soft, pale, traced patterns in the sand. The air smelled faintly of charred wood, but underneath there was something else. A hint of iron, wet almost like a pulse. I thought I heard breathing. Slow, heavy, outside the circle of light. I froze. The fire blinked, as if in response. It was close enough to make the shadows stretch. I could see shapes in the sand, soft, moving edges that didn't belong. The breathing stayed. Not mine, not the wind, something else. I whispered to myself, trying to steady the nerves. Just fire, just fire. The flames flickered again, jerking toward me like a living thing. I could feel the warmth retreating, folding back on itself. I looked up toward the ridge behind me. The stars were bright but distant. Something shifted in the darkness, just at the edge of the firelight. A flicker of movement, a pause, a breath. I stepped back. The fire's glow pulsed. Quick, shallow, matching a rhythm I didn't recognize. It was alive. I could almost hear it thinking, or watching. I knelt, trying to coax the flames, blowing softly, feeding it more kindling. But every ember seemed to shrink, bend, fall inward. A whisper of heat and smoke coiled around me, heavy and close, like a presence I could not see. Then a shift in the sand. A small rustle, barely audible near my ankle. I froze. The fire reacted, curling toward the sound, licking sideways like a tongue. My heart beat faster than the slow pulse of the desert night. The breathing, the fire, something moving between them. I wanted to scream, but the sound caught in my throat. I took another step back. The sand felt hollow beneath my boots, soft and shifting. A pale light flickered across the edges of my vision, and for a moment, I thought I saw a figure leaning over the flames, tall, hunched, impossibly still. I blinked. Nothing. The fire bent again, toward me, not high, not bright, but close. Close enough that I could see the reflection of the dark sky in its flickering embers. I crouched, hands hovering above the coals. The heat was strange now, warm, but not comforting. It pressed against my skin, almost like fingers, and the breathing, it was just behind me. Soft, wet, deliberate. I didn't dare turn. I couldn't. Time stretched. The desert held its breath. Even the stars seemed to hesitate, flicker faintly as though uncertain they should shine. Then a faint click in the wood. The fire shivered. The glow pulsed one last time, and then it was gone. I sat there, alone in darkness. The air smelled of smoke and something older, something waiting. The desert was quiet again, but I could still feel the heat folding inward, like a memory of a fire that refused to burn. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. Every time I blinked, I thought I felt it breathing just behind me. The desert night stretched wide. Cool air slid over my skin, carrying the faint smell of dry earth and sage. I walked along a jagged ridge, Stones crunching underfoot, the fire from campfire behind me, its warmth swallowed by distance. The stars were bright, scattered like fragile glass above me, but the sky didn't feel empty tonight. Something watched. I froze. A shape rested on the far edge of the ridge, hunched, silent, still. At first, I thought it was a boulder, a trick of shadow against starlight. Then it moved, not like a human, not like any creature I'd ever seen. It shifted, awkward, unnatural, as if the angles of its body weren't meant to bend the way they did. I swallowed the sudden dry taste in my mouth. My heartbeat thumped in my ears, but I tried to steady it. I stepped closer, careful, soft. Every footfall a whisper across the rocks. The shape didn't flinch. It tilted its head, slowly. A long shadow stretched toward me, skeletal and thin, yet solid. I could feel the air grow colder. The stars seemed to dim above it, pale light flickering across the ridge like static in a screen. I tried to see its face, but there was only shadow, only a dark silhouette outlined against the night. A soft sound reached me, rustling, faint, deliberate. I realized it wasn't the wind. Something was shifting behind the ridge as well, subtle, patient, watching. I forced myself to take another step. The sand crunched beneath my boots, echoing strangely in the emptiness. The shape bent slightly forward, and then, without moving its legs, it seemed to glide closer. My stomach sank. My instinct screamed to run, but my feet were heavy. Something in its posture. It didn't move like a man, yet it was aware, focused, waiting. I tried to blink it away, to convince myself it was just my imagination, stretched thin by isolation and darkness. But the shadow shifted again, a ripple in the night, tall and deliberate, a silhouette too large to ignore. I realized it wasn't alone. Faint outlines, smaller, crouched in the rocks behind it, pairs of eyes or reflections of moonlight, glinting, watching me. I took a step back. The ridge felt steeper now. Stones slipped under my boots, clattering softly. The shape mirrored me. It didn't run, didn't speak, didn't breathe audibly, but it moved in ways that made the world tilt. I tried to call out. My voice caught in my throat. I only managed a low sound, half whisper, half groan. The shape didn't react in a way I expected. It tilted its head, and the dark mass seemed to ripple as though it were breathing without moving. The wind picked up. Cool air whispered through the ridge, carrying the faint scent of sand and dry brush. But beneath it, there was another scent. Iron, wet, faint, deliberate. I blinked, and for a moment, the silhouette seemed closer. Impossible. The ridge hadn't changed, but the space between us felt smaller, heavier. I wanted to turn and run. I wanted to fall to the sand and cover my face, but my body wouldn't obey. The shape leaned. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but the movement made the stars behind it shiver. I realized something. It had been waiting for me. I stared and my skin crawled. The outline shifted again, unnaturally angular and long. I couldn't tell where one limb ended and the rest of the shadow began. A faint click, like stone brushing stone, echoed behind it. I jerked my head, expecting another form. Nothing. Only the quiet hum of the desert night. The stars overhead blinked, flickered. The shape stretched even taller. I felt my lungs tighten. The darkness here wasn't just absence of light. It was alive, pressing, folding the edges of the night. I finally stepped back. My foot slid on loose sand, and the shape seemed to bend toward me, but never moved closer in the way it should. It was patient, watching, aware. I whispered a name, my own, a breath against the stones. It didn't respond, didn't move, didn't breathe, but I could feel it, waiting. I turned slowly. The ridge behind me stretched empty and silent, moonlight pale against the rocks. The desert held its breath. Even the wind paused. When I looked back, the shape was gone. The ridge was bare, the rocks cold, the stars steady in their place. But I knew it hadn't left. It was still there, somewhere between shadow and stone, waiting. I walked back to camp. Each step felt heavier than the last. The fire was a distant flicker, too small to reach me now. The night swallowed sound. I didn't look back again. Not once. The desert was quiet, but I could still feel it, watching somewhere on that ridge. The night was still. Cold air drifted across the sand, carrying the faint scent of dry brush and distant stone. I had left the ridge behind, retracing my steps to the campsite, but the desert felt different. Footprints appeared in the sand, large, round impressions, deeper than any human could make. I knelt, brushing the edge of one with my fingers. The sand was soft, warm beneath my touch, almost pulsing. I followed them. Each step was deliberate, careful, as if the desert itself were guiding me. The prints circled the campsite, looping in silent patterns, never intersecting my own path. I squinted, the pale light from the moon stretching the shadows. The sand around the prints was undisturbed, smooth like glass. The footprints didn't belong here, not entirely. I felt a presence. The air hummed faintly, almost like static. My skin prickled. Somewhere close, just beyond sight, something breathed. I traced the prints further. They led to a low dune. The sand shifted lightly beneath my hands as I crouched closer. And then they changed. The paw prints became human. The deep, circular impression stretched into long, narrow toes. I followed, heart tightening, fingers brushing against sand that felt warmer with every step. The pattern was perfect, smooth, deliberate, but wrong. I thought I saw movement. A flicker at the edge of the moonlight, shadows curling against the dunes, bending in ways that shouldn't have been possible. I froze. The air smelled faintly of iron. Wet, heavy. I swallowed and forced myself to move. The prints led me around a boulder, then up a small rise. The moonlight fell over crest. I blinked. Nothing. But the sand was different. Disturbed, hollow, as if something had stepped lightly, then disappeared. No tracks. No marks. Only silence. I crouched again, tracing the faint human prints. They ended abruptly. Clawed marks began in their place. Long, deep, deliberate scratches into the sand. My stomach sank. The claws curved unnaturally, like they didn't belong to any animal I'd ever seen. I could feel the presence behind me, closer now, patient, waiting. I held my breath. The desert stretched quiet, the moonlight pale and brittle. The sand hummed faintly under my hands, almost alive. I could feel it moving, shifting slightly, circling me, as though the desert itself was holding its breath. I dared to stand. The air was colder now, brushing my arms, slipping into my clothes. The clawed marks led to a ridge I hadn't noticed before. I stepped closer, the sand crunching softly beneath my boots. Something shifted behind me, a whisper of movement, low and deliberate like someone or something circling. I turned slowly, but there was nothing, only the quiet rustle of sand and the pale moonlight. I followed the trail again. Each paw print, each human step, each clawed scratch, deliberate. The desert was guiding me, or leading me. I reached the top of the ridge. The moon fell across the sand, and I could see a faint outline. Something crouched there, pale and still, its shape impossible to define, legs long, body hunched, head low. I stepped back. The prints ended here. But I knew it hadn't. The desert whispered around me, a dry, hollow hum beneath the stars. The presence lingered, patient, unseen, circling, folding the sand around it like a living thing. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I watched the prints fade into nothing. The claws carved deep into the dune. And somewhere just beyond sight, something waited. The wind shifted, cold and soft, brushing my face. I blinked, and the ridge was empty, silent. I returned to the camp. Every step felt heavier than the last. The fire was a distant glow, but its warmth no longer reached me. The sand hummed beneath my boots, and I felt the presence of something patient, waiting just out of reach. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed awake, tracing the shadows, feeling the air press closer, imagining claws brushing against the sand near me. I knew the prints were gone, but I also knew they weren't. The desert was quiet again, but not empty. Cold air slid over the dunes, carrying the faint scent of sage and dry stone. I had left the ridge, the paw prints, the claws behind, or so I thought. I paused near a shallow wash. The sand was smooth under my boots, pale in the moonlight. The stars were bright, distant, calm, until the first sound broke the silence. A howl. It rolled across the dunes, low and hollow, curling through the rocks like smoke. Not human, not entirely. It lingered, fading into the night. But then, after a pause, another sound answered. Closer, heavier. I froze. The second howl mirrored the first perfectly, but it carried weight, a presence I couldn't see. It wasn't an echo. It was something alive, deliberate, moving toward me through the shadows. The air felt thicker. Each breath I drew was cold and metallic. I wanted to step back, wanted to run. But the sand beneath my boots felt sticky, reluctant. I listened. The first howl rolled again, distant, lonely, curling over the dunes. The second came almost immediately, just behind it, just under it, closer, heavier, as if breathing down my neck. I could feel it pressing against the night, folding the darkness and around me. I crouched. The sand hummed faintly beneath my hands, shifting slightly, almost alive. The moonlight flickered through clouds. The shadows stretched and contracted across the wash. Another pause, and then the howl again. This time, right behind me. I dared a glance. Nothing. Only the dunes, pale and calm. The sand still. The stars unchanged. But the echo remained. Low, deliberate, patient. It followed me, circling, folding around every ridge and hollow. I could feel the vibration in my chest, a resonance that didn't belong to wind or earth. I whispered a name. My own. The desert answered. The howl rolled out again, delayed, distorted, almost mimicking the rhythm of my heartbeat. I pressed my hands to my ears. It didn't stop. It got closer, heavier, deeper, mocking the sound of my own fear. I wanted to run. I wanted to leave everything behind. But the sand shifted beneath my boots, reluctant, holding me in place. Every step forward felt slower, heavier, as though the desert itself were resisting. A cold wind rattled the stones nearby. I blinked. The moonlight caught something, a long shadow moving across the dunes. It wasn't running. It was watching. The howls came again. Twice. First distant, then close, folding the night around me. Each echo heavier than the last, pressing against the emptiness. I crouched again, hands to the sand. It hummed faintly, pulsing with every howl, almost alive beneath my fingers. The presence, unseen, patient, circled me, folding the night, pressing the cold against my skin. I swallowed. The wind carried a faint scent, iron and wet. Not blood, something older, something deliberate. The howls finally faded. Or perhaps I just stopped listening. The desert returned to its quiet hum, empty and still. But I could feel it. The weight in the sand, the shadow over the ridge, the breath of something waiting just beyond sight. I walked slowly back to camp. Every footstep sounded louder than it should, echoing in the empty wash. The fire was a faint glow in the distance, but its warmth barely reached me. The night pressed close, patient, silent, but never empty. I lay awake for hours. The echoes lingered in my mind. Every subtle shift of sand, every distant rock, felt alive. And sometimes in the quietest moments, I could almost hear it breathing. The desert had learned my voice. It had folded it, returned it heavier, darker, closer. And I realized I was not alone. Not then, not ever. The desert night had grown colder. Wind slid over the dunes, brushing my skin like thin fingers. The fire I had managed to coax back to life flickered weakly, a pale glow against the dark. I thought I was alone. Then I felt it, a shift in the air, subtle and deliberate, like a shadow leaning closer. And then I saw him, a man, tall, thin, shoulders hunched, standing at the edge of the firelight. His presence was quiet, soft, but it made the shadows tremble. I hadn't heard him approach. Not a rustle of sand, not a whisper of breath. He smiled faintly, too faint. His voice was soft, almost a hum. "Cold night," he said. I nodded, words lost in my throat. I studied him. Everything about him was wrong. The way he stood, still yet somehow shifting, like he didn't quite belong in the space he occupied. The way his clothes caught the firelight, dark and smooth, as if absorbing it. The flames flared briefly, and I saw his eyes. Amber, Bright, too bright, glinting like molten gold in the fire's reflection. Not warm, not human. They held a light of their own, separate from the fire. I looked away, telling myself it was a trick of the flames. But when I dared to look back, they were still there, watching, waiting. He moved closer, not stepping, not walking, but drifting across the sand. The fire flickered again, bending inward like it had the first night. I could feel the heat collapse away from me, and the air pressed close, thick and wet. I tried to speak. The words stuck, lodged in my throat. His gaze held me in place. I realized I could not move. The desert was silent. The stars were pale overhead. Even the wind seemed to have stopped, as if afraid to disturb the space around him. He crouched slightly, resting one hand near the flames. The fire shivered. I could see the reflection of his amber eyes in every ember, not flickering, not wavering, just glowing. I thought of reaching for my pack, for something, anything, but my body refused. My fingers twitched, but the desert held them still. He spoke again, soft, almost intimate. You shouldn't be out here. The words were calm, but beneath them, hunger, a patient, deliberate weight pressing against the night. I swallowed. My mouth was dry. The fire bent closer to him, curling like a living thing, and I could feel the heat retreating from me, folding around his presence instead. I tried to look past him, toward the ridge, the paw prints, the claws, the echoes of howls. Everything I had seen, everything that had followed me here, it all seemed to circle him now, as if the desert itself waited for him to decide. The sand at my feet shifted lightly. Not wind, not gravity, something deliberate. And I realized it had been here, all along, waiting for me to notice. The fire flared one last time, and in that moment his eyes shone so bright. I felt their heat against my skin, though the flames had only bent inward. I could see the reflection of the night in them. Stones, dunes, stars, and shapes moving just beyond sight. When I looked again, the amber glow was gone. Not dimmed, not faded. Vanished, and the desert was empty. I stayed by the fire for hours. I didn't sleep. Every crackle of embers, every soft rust in the sand made me jump. The memory of his eyes burned in my mind, the way they glowed brighter than the fire itself, reflecting something older than the desert, older than the stars. The night stretched on, long and patient, and somewhere out there I knew he was still watching, not moving, not calling, not breathing, but present, waiting. I didn't dare leave the fire, not even to see if the ridge had returned to its quiet, empty self, not even to follow the paw prints or the claws. The desert was alive, and he had made it his. I finally curled close to the small flames. The heat was faint, weak, not enough to comfort me, but it was all I had. I didn't sleep. I only listened. The desert hummed faintly around me, and sometimes, in the moments between the crackles of the fire, I thought I could hear him whisper again, soft, patient, waiting, and I knew, with a certainty that pressed deep into my chest, I had not seen the last of him. The desert felt different that night, not just cold or silent, but alive. The dunes shifted under the faint moonlight, casting long, uncertain shadows that seemed to pulse with each breath of wind. I had left the ridge behind, the amber-eyed man, the paw prints, everything I thought I had escaped. The sand beneath my boots felt soft, almost spongy. Every step pressed down, then rebounded slightly, as if the ground itself inhaled beneath me. I stopped. The air changed. Heavy, deliberate. It rolled over me like a tide, inhaling and exhaling slowly. I realized the desert was breathing. At first, it was subtle. The dunes rose slightly, then fell. A hollow rhythm, like lungs expanding beneath the sand. Each exhale carried cold, a weight that pressed against my shoulders and chest. I could feel it seeping into my skin, into my bones. I crouched, hands brushing the surface of the sand. It trembled faintly beneath my fingers, pulsing with life. Not wind, not a quake, something deliberate. The stars above flickered pale, uncertain. Every breath of the desert seemed to draw them in, pulling the light from the sky. I shivered. The cold pressed against my back. I thought I heard footsteps, slow, deliberate, circling me in the distance. But when I turned, the sand was smooth, undisturbed. Only the faint ripple of dunes shifting, rising and falling like a chest beneath the ground. I whispered to myself, just wind, just sand, but the rhythm remained. Slow, steady, almost alive. A gust blew across the ridge. The scent of wet stone and iron carried faintly through the air. Not blood, something older, something patient. The sand trembled with it, vibrating slightly against my hands. I stepped back. The desert exhaled, and the cold rushed in like a wave. My lungs felt tight, my chest heavy. Every inhale I took was mirrored by the dunes, rising slightly, pressing the night closer. I glanced toward the ridge behind me. Shadows stretched unnaturally, leaning toward me in slow, deliberate arcs. I knew something was watching. Not close, not near enough to see, but present, patient. The desert breathed again, rising, falling, each exhale colder than the last, slipping under my jacket, curling into my collar. I could feel it brushing my neck, sliding down my arms. The rhythm of the sand was no longer quiet. It pulsed with life. I was not walking alone. I crouched low, pressing my palms to sand. It moved under me, not violently, not sharply. Soft, deliberate, patient, alive. The stars flickered again. A shadow shifted across the crest of a dune. Impossible shape, long and low, hunched against the moonlight. I wanted to move, wanted to run. But the sand held me, folding around my boots, pressing against my legs like a slow, gentle hand. I whispered a name. My own. The desert answered in silence. Not a howl, not a rustle, just a rhythm of breathing, rising and falling beneath the dunes. Closer, closer than it had any right to be. I backed away slowly. Each step pressed deeper into the soft, pulsing sand. The desert inhaled again. Cold rushed over my shoulders. I realized I had stopped moving not because of fear, but because the rhythm had entranced me. The night stretched. Time became a hollow thing, measured only by the breathing of sand and stone. Every ripple, every exhale seemed to carry weight. Every shift of the dunes pressed the emptiness closer. I finally reached the edge of a shallow wash. The sand here felt firmer, the rhythm slower. I pressed my palms to the surface one last time. It was warm, faintly vibrating beneath my touch. Alive, waiting, patient. The stars flickered once more, pale and uncertain. The desert exhaled again, and I realized, with a chill that sank deep into my chest, it had been breathing all along. All along, it had been alive, watching, waiting. I stayed at the edge of the wash until the moon dipped lower. The rhythm slowed, the sand settled. But I knew it would rise again. It always would. I returned to camp. The fire was weak, distant, barely warm. The dunes around me felt taller, heavier, closer. I could feel the desert inhaling behind me, a living, patient presence. I didn't sleep. I only listened, and I felt it pulsing beneath my boots, beneath the sand, breathing. The desert was quiet, but not empty. Cold air rolled over the dunes, brushing my skin in slow, deliberate waves. I had returned to camp, but it didn't feel the same. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Soft at first, almost polite, skipping lightly over sand. I froze. The desert stretched wide, pale under the moonlight. No one should be here. The footsteps grew louder, closer, but they didn't come straight to me. They circled, slow at first, deliberate, then faster, wild, erratic. I stood, heart thumping, eyes scanning the dunes. Nothing moved, only the soft shimmer of sand, the distant stars. And the footsteps, they ran around the campfire, circling the tents, sometimes behind rocks, sometimes over the shallow wash. But every time I turned, there was no one there. The sand remained undisturbed, smooth as if untouched. I whispered, "Who's there?" My voice was swallowed by the night. The footsteps didn't answer. They didn't slow. They only ran in circles. The fire flickered. The glow bent inward again, curling toward the shadows. I could feel heat retreating from my skin, folding back into the flames. The steps continued around me, faster, heavier now, like something pressing the night closer. I crouched low, hands brushing the sand. It felt alive, almost humming beneath my fingers. The footsteps weren't random. They were deliberate, watching, testing, waiting. I tried to track the sound. Right, left, behind, forward. Every direction led only to emptiness. The air hummed with presence. Cold brushed my neck. I could feel eyes just beyond the firelight. A soft rustle. I whipped around. Nothing. The footsteps kept running, circling. Closer, farther. Impossible patterns, folding around me in ways the desert shouldn't allow. I pressed my back against the tent. The canvas shivered. Every heartbeat echoed in my ears. The sand vibrated faintly beneath my boots. And then silence. For a moment, nothing. The desert held its breath. The footsteps stopped. I exhaled, relief flooding me, brief and fragile. Then they started again. Louder, faster, more deliberate. The circling became maddening. It felt as though the desert itself was running, folding the night into motion. Every step pressed against my chest. Every turn seemed to shrink the space around me. I wanted to run. I wanted to leave, to fall into the dunes and escape. But the sand seemed to hold me. It wasn't physical. It was deliberate, patient. The fire bent inward again. Flames shivered, flickering across the edges of my vision. I could feel movement in the shadows, something long, low, crouched, patient, watching me, circling with the footsteps, folding the air. I whispered, "Go away!" The desert ignored me. The steps continued, faster, echoing around the camp, closer, but never reaching me, always just beyond. The moonlight stretched across the sand. Shadows lengthened. The footsteps stopped again. I dared to breathe. Then, faintly a low hum, underneath the rhythm of the sand, underneath the circling steps. Something alive, deliberate, patient. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I only listened. The night held me, pressed close. The footsteps faded, folding into the dunes. The desert returned to silence. But it wasn't empty. Not truly. Every time the wind shifted, I could feel it moving around me, pressing, watching, circling still. I sat by the fire until the first pale light of dawn. The steps had stopped. The sand lay smooth, untouched. But the memory of them, the sound of them running in impossible circles, it pressed to my chest, echoed in my mind. I didn't sleep. I stayed awake, listening for the footsteps to return. Every ripple of sand, every faint whisper of wind, felt deliberate, as though the desert itself was running in circles around me. And I knew it wouldn't stop. Not ever. The desert had grown colder. The moon hung low, pale and thin, and the dunes stretched endlessly around my camp. The fire was weak now, a faint glow that barely touched the edges of the tents. I crawled into mine, zipping it slowly, trying to trap the warmth. The canvas pressed close, familiar and oddly comforting. But the night, it was patient. A soft tremor ran through the sand beneath me. I paused, listening. The wind whispered, but the tremor didn't stop. Then the tent shivered. Just a faint rustle at first, brushing the canvas. I froze, chest tightening. Another shiver, sharper this time, like something brushing against the fabric from outside. I held my breath. It stopped. I told myself it was the wind, a simple gust, nothing more. But then it shivered again. Harder, violent, deliberate. The poles groaned under pressure. My body pressed flat against a sleeping bag, hands clutching the fabric. I could feel it moving around me, not under the sand this time. Outside, close, patient, waiting. The shivering grew stronger, shaking the tent in sharp, sudden bursts. I pressed my face into the sleeping bag. The canvas quivered, clawing, raking, though I could see no marks, feel no hands. A low hum vibrated through the tent. I didn't recognize it. Not wind, not the earth. Something deliberate, patient, alive. I forced myself to stay still. Every instinct screamed to run, to throw the zipper open and flee into the cold desert. But something held me there. Not fear exactly. Something worse. Curiosity, edged with dread. The tent shook again, harder this time. The sleeping bag twisted beneath me. My hand scraped against the sand, trying to anchor myself. I could hear the fabric stretching, rattling, something moving just beyond. The air inside grew colder. It pressed against my cheeks, crawling down my sleeves. Every inhale was sharp, metallic, tinged with that faint smell of iron and wet earth. The desert was patient, folding the night in around me. I tried to whisper to myself, soft, steady. It's nothing, it's just wind. But even the words fell hollow. The tent shivered again, deliberate, sharp. I pressed flat against the canvas. Every nerve felt electric. The shadows outside the thin fabric flickered in ways that made no sense. Shapes shifted, long, low, impossible angles. Not moving like animals. Not moving like humans. Something else entirely. The shaking stopped. For a moment, I dared to breathe. The tent sagged slightly, exhausted, silent. Then, a faint click. Something tapped against the sand outside. Soft, patient, a rhythm that felt deliberate, waiting. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I only listened. The night hummed around me. The desert exhaled, folding close, pressing cold against my skin. Minutes or hours passed. Time stretched. The shadows beyond the canvas remained still. The sand hummed faintly beneath me, vibrating with a memory of movement. I realized I hadn't heard the fire in a long while. It must have died down. I didn't care. Even the warmth of the flames could not reach me here. The desert was closer, alive, deliberate. I pressed myself lower into the sleeping bag. The canvas was soft against my face, but I felt it trembling again, subtle now, patient. Not enough to see, but enough to know it was there. Outside, watching, waiting. The wind picked up faintly. Cold air pressed inside, carrying faint smells, dust, dry brush, and something older. I shivered. The desert had learned me. The tent, my only shelter, was not safe. I didn't sleep. I stayed awake, listening. Every rustle of sand, every faint shift of canvas, pressed against my mind like a finger tracing my spine. Every vibration in the dunes outside whispered patience, deliberate and knowing. By morning, the tent was calm. No marks, no evidence, only silence, only the desert stretching endlessly around me, patient, alive, waiting. I left the tent slowly, careful, hands brushing the soft sand. Every step pressed into memory. Every ripple of dune carried the hum of what had been there. I knew it hadn't gone. It never would. The desert watched, and I was not alone. The desert was calm. Cold air drifted across the dunes, carrying the faint scent of sand and dry brush. The stars were scattered and pale, fragile against the dark sky. I had left the tent behind. The shaking, the unseen presence. But the desert was patient. It never truly let go. I walked toward a cluster of rocks, low and jagged, shaped by centuries of wind. The sand beneath my boots was soft, shifting slightly with every step, like the desert itself inhaled beneath me. Then I heard it, a whistle, soft, almost playful, carried by the wind, curling over the dunes, sliding between the rocks. The tune was simple, familiar, but wrong, not human, not natural. I stopped. The stars seemed to flicker, pale light trembling across the sand. The whistle repeated, again and again, each time closer, each time deliberate. I listened. The melody was too perfect, curling in impossible arcs through the air. It carried a weight, a patient, waiting weight that pressed against the edges of the night. I stepped closer to the rocks. The sand shifted beneath me, soft and alive. I could feel it pressing against my boots. Patient, deliberate. The whistle followed, bending around the stones, calling, curling, almost coaxing me forward. I wanted to leave. I wanted to run. But the air pressed close, wrapping around my chest, filling my lungs with cold. The desert held me there. I crept forward, careful. The whistle rose slightly, higher, a note too bright, too deliberate. It carried something, watching, something patient, folding the night around me. I peered behind the rocks. Nothing, only shadows, only the pale moonlight sliding over the sand. The wind shifted. The whistle changed, bending slightly, curling toward me. I felt in my chest, a vibration low and deliberate, pressing against my ribs. The stars above seemed to tremble, flicker uncertainly. I whispered to myself, "It's just wind, just echoes," but the whistle didn't fade. It grew, patient, coaxing. It carried intent, deliberate and knowing. I stepped around a boulder. The sand hummed faintly beneath my boots, soft, alive, and then I saw it. A shadow, long, low, crouched between two rocks. It didn't move, didn't breathe audibly, but I could feel it folding the air, patient and waiting. The whistle shifted again. Closer, higher. It wasn't a sound. It was a presence. Calling, coaxing. I pressed myself flat against the sand, hands brushing the soft grains, cold and slightly damp beneath my fingers. The shadow remained, watching, patient. The desert folded around it, still and alive. I whispered again. My voice trembled. "Go away!" The whistle replied, curling through the rocks, impossibly precise, repeating, coaxing. I froze. The desert hummed beneath me, every grain of sand alive. The wind pressed close, carrying faint smells, drier, dust, and something older. The shadow didn't move. It didn't need to. I slowly backed away. The whistle followed, curling around stones and dunes, patient, deliberate. Every step felt heavier, as though the sand itself resisted. Every heartbeat echoed in my chest. I didn't look back, not until I reached the edge of the wash, where the sand flattened into familiar shapes. The whistle lingered for a moment, curling faintly through the night, and then silence. The desert returned to calm, cold, quiet, patient, but I could feel it still, the presence behind the rocks, waiting, coaxing. I returned to camp, careful, deliberate, hands brushing the soft sand. The fire was low, pale, almost dead. Its warmth barely touched me. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed awake, listening. Every shift of sand, every faint whisper of wind, every impossible echo pressed against my mind. And I knew, somewhere just beyond the rocks, something was waiting, and the whistle would return. The desert was still. Cold air pressed against my skin, carrying the faint scent of dry sand and stone. The fire at camp flickered weakly, pale and low, barely reaching the edges of my small tent. I knelt beside it, trying to coax warmth from the stubborn embers. The flames bent inward again, curling toward themselves as if the air around them refused to let them rise. And then I saw them, eyes, glowing, pale amber light, just above the smoke, suspended in the darkness. Not human, not entirely, but aware, watching. I froze. The desert held its breath with me. The wind stilled. The stars blinked faintly, uncertain. The flames flickered, bending closer to the eyes, almost reaching them. I tried to move. My hands hovered over the embers, but I couldn't look away. They were too bright, too deliberate, not reflections of the fire, not shadows. They existed beyond it. The air smelled faintly of iron, wet and old. Each inhale pressed cold and deliberate into my chest. I could feel it, not beneath me this time, but above, patient, waiting. The eyes didn't blink. They only observed, curved softly in the smoke, shifting slightly as the embers pulsed. Every flicker made them stretch, bend, fold the darkness around them. I whispered to myself, voice small, tremulous, not real, not real. But the smoke carried no sound, only the softening of the night, deliberate and alive. The fire flared, the glow reflected in the eyes, making them brighter, sharper, impossible. I could see shapes in the dark beyond them, shadows folding in angles that made no sense. Low, crouched, patient, waiting. I swallowed hard. The embers hissed faintly beneath my fingers. The eyes followed each subtle movement, each breath I dared take. I realized then they weren't just observing the fire. They were observing me. I pressed my hands flat against the sand, grounded myself. The desert hummed faintly beneath me, alive in ways I still didn't understand. I could feel it folding the air, pressing the night close. The eyes above the smoke did not falter. They glowed, patient, deliberate. A rustle shifted behind me. I jerked my head, heart thumping. Nothing. The fire flared again, bending toward me, retreating, curling, alive, and the eyes remained. I whispered again, soft, careful. I see you. The words trembled in the desert air. The eyes didn't respond. But the sand hummed. Low, deliberate, alive. The flames bent one last time. And then the glow dimmed slightly. The shapes beyond the eyes retreated into the darkness, folding the shadows away. But the eyes themselves remained, suspended above the fire, patient, waiting. I backed slowly. Every step pressed deeper into the soft sand. The desert exhaled faintly, folding around me, holding me. Every breeze carried a weight, deliberate and knowing. The eyes tracked me with the faintest hint of movement, glowing just enough to remind me they were there. I didn't dare sleep. I stayed awake beside the weak fire, watching. Every flicker, every shadow, every faint hum of sand beneath my palms made me flinch. The desert held me close, patient, alive, deliberate. I tried to convince myself I was imagining it, that the desert, the fire, the night, it was only tricks of light and wind. But I knew better. I could feel the weight in the air, the pressure in the sand, the deliberate presence, patient above the flames. Hours passed. The stars blinked, pale and distant. The fire finally softened, warmth retreating into the embers. The eyes hovered in the smoke, faint, glowing, aware, watching, waiting. I finally curled close to the dying fire, hands over my chest, feeling the desert pulse beneath me, and I realized with a cold certainty that it had been waiting all along, not for the fire, not for the sand, but for me. I didn't sleep. I only listened, and sometimes when the wind shifted just right, I thought I could feel the eyes above me, following. The night was quiet, too quiet. I walked along a shallow ridge, sand crunching softly under my boots, each step swallowed by the desert. Above me, the stars blinked pale and steady. Then they didn't. One by one, the stars vanished. Not clouds, not wind, just gone. The sky stretched black, impossible, infinite. I stopped. The air pressed close, heavy and still. I could feel the cold seep into my chest, my lungs. A shape rose above the dunes. Too large, impossibly dark. It swallowed the horizon. The desert felt smaller suddenly, the sand folding beneath me like a breath held too long. I tried to turn, to run, but the ground felt different now. Soft, yielding, folding beneath my feet. The darkness above moved slowly, patient, deliberate. I whispered, my voice lost in the emptiness. Not real, but the shape didn't falter. It only stretched, folding the night into itself. The desert seemed alive beneath me. Sand hummed faintly under my boots, vibrating with a weight I couldn't name. Every grain pressed against me, patient, deliberate. I wanted to close my eyes, to escape the black sky. But when I dared, I felt it watching, waiting, patient. I finally stepped forward. Each movement pressed heavier into the sand. The darkness above pulsed faintly, folding, bending. The stars were gone, swallowed by something older than the night itself. I didn't look back. I didn't breathe. The desert held me, patient, deliberate, alive. The desert held its silence. Moonlight fell pale across the dunes, long shadows stretching like fingers. I paused, boots pressing into soft, yielding sand. Then I heard it. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, approaching the camp, but not in the way a human walks. No rhythm, no weight, only patience. I swung the lantern, the weak glow stretching across the dunes. Nothing. The sand was undisturbed. Not a single print. I whispered, heart thumping, "Who's there?" The desert held the sound and returned silence. The footsteps continued. Closer, slower, patient, deliberate, folding the night in. I backed away toward the fire. Each movement felt heavier, as though the sand resisted. The presence didn't step into the light. It only circled, deliberate, waiting. The wind shifted. I caught a faint metallic scent, wet, old, not blood, something deliberate, patient. I held the lantern higher. Shadows stretched and shifted across the sand. Nothing moved, yet I could feel it, watching, waiting. The footsteps slowed, paused, then faded into nothing. But I knew it hadn't left. The desert was calm, briefly. Then the wind rose, cold and deliberate, curling around the dunes. Dust lifted, sand swirled, forming small whirlwinds around my boots. A low growl rolled through the storm. Deep, alive, not an animal I knew, not wind. I froze. The sand swirled around me like a black sea. The growl shifted closer, deliberate, patient. I could feel its weight pressing against my legs, through the boots, into my chest. The storm grew heavier. Sand stung my face, slipped into my clothes, pressed cold and sharp against my skin. The growl pulsed with it, alive, deliberate. I stepped backward. The desert seemed to shift underfoot, folding the sand around me. Every inhale carried grit. Every breath pressed heavy and metallic against my chest. The growl rolled again, deeper now, vibrating beneath the dunes. Not just sound, but weight, presence, something alive beneath the earth. Patient, deliberate. I crouched, pressing hands to sand. It hummed faintly, alive beneath my palms. The storm rattled rocks. Shadows bent in impossible ways. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I only listened. And I knew, whatever it was, it had been waiting. I returned to camp after the storm. The dunes stretched pale under the moonlight. The sand hummed faintly beneath my boots. Everything was different. The tent wasn't where I left it. The fire pit had moved. Small embers scattered across sand that looked untouched. Even my gear had shifted, dragged slightly across the dunes. No footprints. No marks. Nothing to explain it. I crouched, tracing the edges of the sand. It hummed beneath my fingers, soft, alive, deliberate. The camp had moved, but not naturally. The desert pressed around me, patient. The air smelled faintly of iron and wet stone. Every breeze seemed to push against me, deliberate, shaping the dunes. I tried to remember the layout. The tent, the fire, my pack, all changed. And I knew I hadn't moved it. Nothing had. The night held me, patient, deliberate. The desert hummed beneath my palms, beneath my boots. Waiting. I stopped at a small desert spring. Moonlight glinted off the water, pale and trembling. The air was quiet, cold and still. Then a howl rolled across the desert. Deep, hollow, curling across the dunes. It rattled the surface of the water, sending faint ripples that glimmered like silver. I froze. The howl repeated, delayed, heavier, closer. Not wind, not animal. Something alive, patient, deliberate. The water shimmered faintly. Shadows stretched across the sand, bending in impossible angles. The howl rolled again. Closer. Patient. I knelt beside the spring, hands brushing the water. It trembled beneath my fingers, alive with the echo of sound. The desert seemed to hum, folding the night in around me. Another howl, then silence. I dared a breath. The air was cold, heavy. I could feel it pressing against my chest. Patient, waiting. The desert watched. The water shivered. The echoes lingered. And I realized I was not alone. The dunes were quiet. Cold air rolled over the sand, brushing my skin with faint, deliberate pressure. I walked slowly, boots pressing softly into the yielding ground. A shadow stretched across the sand. Long, thin, unnaturally still. It didn't match my own. I froze. The wind died. The desert hummed faintly beneath my boots. The shadow began to move. Slowly, deliberately. I didn't move. I couldn't. It rose. Not bending. Not walking. Rising. Stretching. Folding the darkness around it. Patient. I whispered. Stay still. The desert swallowed the words. The shadow continued, taller now, impossibly long, pressing close. The stars flickered faintly above. Cold pressed against my chest. The sand hummed faintly under my fingers. I didn't breathe. I didn't blink. I watched it stand fully upright. Then it paused. Patient. Waiting. The desert exhaled faintly. And I knew it had been watching me all along. The wind shifted, cold and deliberate. The dunes hummed faintly beneath my boots. I walked slowly, hand brushing the pale sand, listening. The wind revealed shapes. Bones. Scattered across a low ridge. Animal. Mostly, I thought at first. but something was off. I crouched. The sand was soft beneath my fingers. I touched a rib, warm, vibrating faintly. Alive. I swallowed hard. The desert smelled faintly of iron, old and wet. The bones trembled beneath my touch. I backed away slightly. They remained, vibrating softly, patient. I bent closer, brushing another piece. It was warmer still. The desert hummed faintly beneath my palms. Shadows shifted behind a dune. The stars blinked uncertainly. A shape moved low, crouched patient, watching. I stood slowly. The wind pressed cold across my back. Every inhale carried the faint hum of life from the bones. Alive, deliberate, patient. I stepped away, hands brushing the sand carefully. The desert folded around me, pressing close. The bones remained warm and humming, patient and waiting. I didn't sleep that night. I only listened. The horizon was pale under the moonlight. I squinted. Dozens of glowing eyes reflected faint light, scattered across the dunes. At first, they were distant. Small points of amber, patient and still. I watched. The longer I stared, the closer they seemed. Not running, not walking, sliding across the sand, deliberate, folding the night in. The desert hummed beneath my boots. Cold pressed against my skin. I wanted to move. I wanted to run. But every step felt heavy, slow, as if the dunes themselves resisted. The pack didn't advance in normal patterns. They circled, patient, watching, folding the darkness around them. A low hum rose from the sand. The eyes shifted slightly in unison, deliberate, alive. I realized they were not just animals. Not entirely. I crouched, hands brushing the sand. It vibrated faintly, alive beneath my palms. The pack seemed endless, patient, waiting, and the desert pressed close, folding them, holding them alive. I didn't speak. I didn't move. I only listened. I shouted into the night. A simple cry, desperate. The desert answered. The echo came back perfectly. My own voice, but delayed, heavier, distorted. Closer. I swallowed hard. The sand hummed faintly beneath my boots. The air pressed against my chest, deliberate, alive. I shouted again. The desert repeated, folding the sound, layering it heavier, darker. Not wind, not echo, something alive, patient. I crouched low, pressing hands to the sand. It vibrated faintly beneath me, humming. The dunes themselves seemed to fold, inhaling and exhaling with the sound. Another shout, another return. The desert copied me perfectly, mocking, patient, deliberate. I realized then I was not alone. It had been listening, waiting, patient. The stars flickered faintly. Cold pressed across my face. The dunes pulsed faintly beneath my hands. And then silence. But I knew the desert had learned my voice, and it would remember. The wind rose faintly. I moved toward a low cave, seeking shelter from the cold night. Moonlight caught jagged rock edges, casting long shadows across the sand. The entrance was covered in scratches. Deep, deliberate, too high for any animal I had ever seen. Long marks gouged the stone, curling in unnatural patterns. I stepped closer. The air smelled faintly of iron and dust. The sand hummed beneath my boots, alive, deliberate. I crouched at the entrance. Inside, darkness pressed, heavy and patient. The scratches continued, curling up the walls, deep and deliberate. I reached out, fingers brushing a gouge. It vibrated faintly beneath my touch, warm and alive. A low hum echoed from deep within the cave. Not wind, not distant animals. Something deliberate, patient, watching. I stepped back. The desert pressed around me, patient, folding the night in. Every inhale carried the faint scent of old stone, iron, and waiting. I pressed my palms to sand outside the cave. It hummed faintly, alive beneath my hands. The scratches seemed to pulse slightly, the rock itself patient, deliberate. I didn't enter. I didn't need to. I knew it had been waiting. The desert had folded the cave around something impossible, deliberate, alive. I moved on slowly. Every step pressed into the soft, humming sand. Every shadow stretched long and patient beneath the moon. The cave remained behind me, silent but alive, waiting. Midnight had fallen. The desert was quiet, cold, patient. I sat by the fire, watching faint embers curl and flicker. Then it happened. The flames snuffed out. No wind, no sound, just darkness. I froze. The desert pressed close, heavier now. Shadows folded around me, patient, deliberate. Something stood beyond the fire, tall, impossible. I could see its outline faintly in the residual glow of smoke. It didn't move, didn't breathe audibly, but I felt it, aware, waiting. The sand beneath me hummed faintly. I pressed my palms flat. Cold pressed against my skin. The desert held me still, patient, deliberate. I whispered, I see you. No answer, only silence, thick and alive. The darkness pressed closer. Every nerve in my body hummed with awareness. The desert was folding around the shape. Every small sound, sand shifting, distant stones, felt amplified, deliberate. I dared a glance. It didn't move. Not human, not animal. Something else entirely. Patient, waiting. Hours passed. I didn't breathe. I didn't move. Only felt the desert hold me. The fire never returned that night. Only the faint hum of the sand beneath me, and the tall shape, patient, impossible, beyond reach. I lay in my sleeping bag. The desert stretched quiet and patient around me. The wind hummed faintly across the dunes. Then I felt it, warm breath against my ear. Soft, deliberate. I was alone. No one should have been there. I froze. The desert hummed faintly beneath me. Every nerve tightened. The air pressed close. I whispered to myself. Nothing, nothing. The breath lingered. Alive. Patient. Deliberate. I turned slightly. Nothing. The air shifted, heavy and close. Every inhale carried weight, pressing against my chest. The sand hummed beneath me. Soft, alive. The dunes seemed to fold in closer. The desert had learned me. I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe too deeply. The warmth pressed patient against my ear, and I realized it had been waiting. The night stretched long. Hours, minutes, I couldn't tell. Only the desert, humming beneath me, patient, deliberate. By dawn, the breath was gone, but its presence lingered. Patient, waiting, alive beneath the dunes. The desert was quiet, but alive. I watched the dunes shift, slowly, deliberately, as if the sand itself were breathing. I blinked. The hills of sand changed shape. A ridge where I had walked the night before no longer existed. The dunes circled my camp, folding the space like a black ocean. I stepped forward. The sand gave beneath my boots, soft, humming faintly. Each step pressed deeper. Each ripple seemed alive. The wind was faint, deliberate. Cold brushed my face. The desert folded closer, patient, alive. I walked carefully around the camp. Tents shifted slightly, poles leaning, canvas pressing gently. I didn't touch anything. I only watched. Shadows stretched across the sand in impossible angles. The dunes moved slowly, circling me. I realized I could not leave. The desert held me, folding the night in around me. Every inhale carried weight. Every step pressed into a soft, humming rhythm. The dunes were deliberate, patient, waiting. I crouched, pressing hands to the soft sand. It pulsed faintly beneath my fingers. Alive, and I knew it had been moving all along. I followed the footprints. Human at first, slow, deliberate, pressed lightly into sand. Then something changed. Clawed impressions replaced them. Deep, long, impossible. I froze. The desert hummed faintly beneath my boots. The claws pressed deliberate against the dunes. I followed carefully. The footprints circled, folding the night in. Every step echoed too loudly, carrying a weight beneath the sand. I crouched, brushing the claw marks. The sand vibrated faintly beneath my fingers. Alive, patient. Shadows moved low across the dunes. I dared a glance. Something watched. Patient, waiting. I pressed my palms to the sand again. The human footprints had vanished. Only claws remained, folding the night in. I didn't turn back. I only walked forward. Every step pressed deliberate into the sand, and I knew it had been waiting all along. No matter how far I traveled, I returned to the same campfire. Each night, I would wander the dunes, seeking safety, but always the same place. The fire waited, small, pale, patient, embers glowing faintly in the cold desert night. I sat beside it, exhausted, boots pressing into soft sand. The desert hummed faintly beneath me, alive, deliberate. I looked around. Nothing moved. No shadows, no shapes, no distant eyes. Only the camp, and the quiet weight of the desert pressing close. I realized then it had been waiting for me. Every footprint, every claw, every whispered echo, all folded the desert around this place. I pressed hands to the soft sand. It hummed faintly, alive beneath my fingers. Patient, deliberate. I closed my eyes. The desert exhaled faintly. The dunes shifted softly. And I understood the camp itself was alive, waiting, patient. Hours passed. I didn't sleep. I only listened. Every subtle shift of sand, every faint ripple in the dunes, carried presence. The fire remained. Small, weak, deliberate. It didn't burn high, but it glowed faintly, patient, waiting. I realized then I could never leave. The desert had folded me into its rhythm. Every path I took, every night I survived, returned me here. The camp waited. The desert waited. And I knew I would never be alone.